Before we get to the fun stuff, as a ceasefire has not been called, I need to take a moment to briefly talk about Palestine. At time of recording, we are 87 days, almost 3 months, into the Israeli occupation committing genocide against the Palestinian people. We need to continue protesting and continuing to follow the BDS boycott. Money talks, and unfortunately, the economy seems to be the only way to convince those in power to listen. The PFLP has called for boycotts every Monday. Talk with your coworkers about organized walkouts from your work. Don't spend money on Mondays if you can avoid it. And if you can't, try to give that money to local businesses. The ceasefire needs to happen as soon as possible, and it's unconscionable that Western governments have allowed this violence to continue for this long and have supported it with money and weapons. Stay strong. We can make this happen. Free Palestine forever and always. Hi, hello, it's Rachel. So, I'll admit that I'm a fan of Zack Snyder's movies. I have been excitedly waiting for Rebel Moon for over a year now. So, unsurprisingly, I watched Rebel Moon the day it came out. And I really liked it a lot. And then I went on Letterboxd, and almost every review I saw was negative. So, I want to dissect this film a bit and share my thoughts on it. Now, as I said, I'm a fan of Zack Snyder's movies, but I am not a Zack Snyder stan. I'm not sure if I brought up Snyder on my channel before outside of my very rambly DCEU tier list video, and I might have called myself a stan in that video. When I use that word in reference to real people, I mean it jokingly, as 2020 and the lack of support for the BLM protest from the majority of celebrities has done a pretty good job of making me disconnect from celebrity culture, and I've just been very disinterested in all of that in the past few years. I'm just extremely passionate about a bunch of Zack's films, so my excitement for his projects is about the closest I've come to quote-unquote standing in the past handful of years. I mostly want to say this because I am aware of Snyder signing that pro-Israeli letter condemning Hamas, which is incredibly disappointing. Given Rebel Moon is explicitly anti-fascist and anti-imperialism, it seems like this decision was made out of ignorance and misinformation, not out of malice. I mean, look at this scene.
Alright, listen up! I need all of this gear moved to this big stone building that should suit us for now. Marcus, you gonna help me evict the current residents from our new home, copy?
Copy you, boss.
Like, it's insane how much this mirrors the behavior of Israeli settlers. Snyder clearly understands that settler colonialism is wrong and abhorrent, even if it is considered legal. So I do believe that if he knew more, there is no way he would have signed the pro-Israeli letter. But that does not let him off the hook. As someone in his 50s, he could easily do some research instead of just completely accepting the biased narrative from the US propaganda machine. I know some people completely lost interest in Rebel Moon upon learning that his name was among the celebs who had signed the letter. But given the amount of celebrities who did sign that, because I think it's like 600 or something, and the amount of celebrities who've been completely or mostly silent and have gone on promoting their daily lives as if we aren't literally watching a genocide be documented in real time. While I definitely do not care about any of these celebrities on a personal level anymore, for me, the line that I won't cross is supporting people who are actively spewing Israeli propaganda. And as far as I'm aware, neither Snyder nor anyone in the cast has done that. Although if I'm wrong, please let me know. I say all that because I needed to acknowledge the elephant in the room, but now let's talk about the actual film. So let's start with some general thoughts. It's not a secret that this is a rejected Star Wars script, and when you know that fact, it becomes incredibly obvious in the visuals. Like, first shot of the film, I was like, oh yeah, I already see the Star Wars vibe. And even if this technically is not a Star Wars film, I'm still gonna say it's the prettiest Star Wars has ever looked, and I think this is what we deserved over the sequel trilogy. Snyder knows how to deliver breathtaking aesthetics, and anyone who says otherwise is just lying to themselves. I've heard the complaint that there was too much slow mo, and while I'm not super opinionated on this point, I can see why people would feel that way. Quite a bit of the slow mo doesn't really add much, and a lot of the action scenes use slow mo multiple times. But the cinematography is still gorgeous, so I'm a bit more forgiving than other people might be about this. I also feel the need to say the dialogue works well enough for its purpose, but it's a lot more functional than it is mellifluous or memorable. A lot of the dialogue feels like it clearly expresses the point it wants to get across, and it successfully hits the emotional beats that it's aiming for. But this will never be a film that I'll be quoting along with, unlike some of Snyder's other work. I also just want to note that I've seen a lot of people voice disappointment over the fact that this film was more of a team gathering movie. And while that was not my expectation going in, I realized around the halfway mark that this was going to be the case. And once I had that realization, I didn't really mind it. Given the 2+ hour runtime, I really wish the film had done a better job at establishing the characters outside of Korra and Gunnar, as I feel the introductions of everyone else mostly shows how they'll be invaluable to the Resistance, but they give us very little information about who they actually are. I presume and hope that we will learn a lot more about the rest of the characters in part 2. I also think part 1 was very caught up in the world building, which, don't get me wrong, is essential, but because there was so much lore to establish, that gave less time for character building. Which, again, it's part 1 of what will probably be a very big universe, if Rebel Moon being the #1 movie on Netflix upon its release is any indication. And I also feel like I should mention that upon reaching the end, this really felt like the equivalent of if Justice League had just cut off when the League decided to resurrect Superman. Like, it's a good start and a promise of more exciting things to come, but it's kind of like an awkward place to leave things. Which, granted, the sequel's coming out in like 4 months, so we don't have to wait too long. But it is a little awkward with the way it just ends abruptly. I think part of this is that there is an impatience for long form storytelling, which isn't anything new. Like, a lot of film criticism from the past decade or so has kind of proven that the general public has a preference for simple and easy popcorn flicks that are required to resolve everything by the end. And Snyder just doesn't really make those films. So, like, it's fine if that's your preference, but maybe stop expecting Snyder's films to do that and stop seeing it as a flaw when it's just not what you want. I think that's about it for general thoughts. So, I'm gonna get more into details and some spoiler territory. So, if you don't want spoilers, this is your warning. The film starts with Cora, our lead, working in a field. She has been part of the farming community on a planet named Velt for the past 2 years. As we learn a bit later, Cora's family was murdered when the Motherworld's army, the Imperium, attacked her planet when she was a child, and a soldier spared her to become his protege. She was indoctrinated into their army, known to be incredibly skilled in combat and vital in helping the Motherworld conquer other planets. As she continued to rise in the ranks, she was eventually given the role of protecting Princess Issa, the daughter of the king and queen that the Imperium served under. While we don't know her reason for abandoning the Mother World, I'm presuming that she deserted either due to the horror of not being able to protect Princess Issa, although I do not think she is dead as everyone seems to believe, or that Korra saw some other act of brutality against people who did not fight back. So, as I said before, this was initially supposed to be a Star Wars film, so seeing Korra's background, I cannot help but think about the parallels to Finn and how Korra will very likely have the arc that Finn should have had, because they were both groomed as young children to be part of a war machine, breaking free when they were confronted with the horror of what they were a part of, both wanting to run and hide from this life, but feeling a call to join the rebellion and help tear down these fascist organizations. Like, God, my heart just hurts for how much the sequel trilogy fucked over Finn and John Boyega. Fuck you, Rian Johnson. I will never forgive you for your bullshit that you pulled in The Last Jedi. Anyway, the next character we meet is Gunnar. It's pretty obvious from his first moment on screen that he has feelings for Korra. He watches her working in the field, and during the community dinner, he can't seem to take his eyes off of her. Korra seems hesitant to reciprocate anything and later vocalizes to another character that she doesn't think she's capable of loving someone or being loved, as it's clear that the guilt she feels from her actions when brainwashed by the Imperium still eats away at her. But as the film continues, there's a sense that if she were open to pursuing a romance, he would definitely be a potential suitor. Gunnar is depicted as a humble farmer, very satisfied with his life on Velt and clueless about life outside of this community. We meet a few other characters in the village. The other two I want to mention are Sindri, the community leader, and Sam, a young farm girl who is known for being incredibly kind. Sindri and Sam have small roles in the film, but they kind of end up being integral to the fabric of the story. So, Velt is established. We have a sense of what life is like for Korra. And it is here where a ship from the Imperium arrives. The community gathers and they argue about how they should approach the Imperium officers, with Korra urging the community to not offer anything to them, as she advises that the Imperium will just take everything from Velt if they are given an inch. Sindri heeds her warning, but Gunnar does not seem to trust her judgment, as he appears eager to sell surplus to the Imperium, as he suspects the Mother World will pay large amounts of money given all of their resources. The rest of the community seems to back Sindri's decision, and the Imperium officers arrive, led by a man named Noble. So, Gunnar is supposed to be read as naive, and his claim of not caring about politics outside of their farming community exemplifies that. And to continue with the Star Wars comparisons, I get the feeling that he is our Cassian equivalent, where he starts off mostly only concerned with himself, but as he gets exposed to injustice, he kind of falls into the role of revolutionary, not being able to stand by as he sees these evil deeds happening. But, unlike Cassian, to me at least, Gunnar comes off kind of selfish. Like, during the argument before they greet the Imperium officers, Sindri says that Gunnar has been secretly selling Velt's surplus in previous years, which implies that Gunnar has been pocketing that money for himself and not sharing it with the community. Even after Korra's warning of how dangerous it is to work with the Mother World, Gunnar is still considering doing so. Meanwhile, prior to rejoining the rebels, Cassian's more self-serving behaviors stem from necessity, as a lot of his actions are him struggling to survive. Anyway, Sindri knows how to play politics, and he remains incredibly polite and shows a facade of warmth to Noble, while firmly telling him that they cannot help. Everyone seemed to be in agreement that the goal was to get the Imperium soldiers to leave as soon as possible without offering to supply them anything. But Gunnar volunteers information that directly contradicts what Sindri had said about Velt's food production. This leads to an incredibly tense scene where it's clear that Noble is angry at having been lied to, and you, as the viewer, just know in your gut that someone is about to get killed. But the way the scene plays out, you wonder who Noble thinks is lying. Noble correctly presumes that Sindri has misled him about Vel's production and quickly murders him using his bone staff to commit the deed. Now, I know the narrative insists that there had to be this act of brutality to prompt the rest of the story into motion, but it just really does not paint Gunnar in the best light. I'm not going to say it's an impossible feat for my opinion on Gunnar to turn around. I mean, it's clear in his character arc in this film that he is starting to take the steps to become a true rebel, and this can be salvageable with the right execution. But given what I've seen of him in this first film, I just find it incredibly difficult to find him sympathetic. Like, if I'm being brutally honest, I spent most of his scenes where he's in danger hoping he was going to get killed off. Which is just not the ideal way to feel about a movie's male lead. Which also, crazily enough, I think this is the first male lead in a Snyder film that I've actively disliked. So that's a bummer. Also, yes, before anyone says anything, I do know part 2 is going to pursue the romance between him and Cora. I saw the kiss in the trailer. It hurts me. We're not going to talk about it for the rest of this review. Back to the plot. So, the community is in a panic after seeing Sindri and his wife murdered in front of them. Noble leaves Velt, but a handful of his troops stay to oversee the civilians while he's away. Most of these troops aren't important, but I suspect Eris and Jimmy will become important in the future. Eris is a very young Imperium officer who seems very resistant to their indoctrination, as he regularly tries to step in and stop other officers' brutality. Jimmy is a robot who served the king, and his initial purpose was to participate in combat, but since the king's death, Jimmy no longer fights and tends to do menial labor for the Imperium. Because one soldier is on a power trip and fucking around with Jimmy, Jimmy finds himself alone with Sam, and she shows him kindness as he tells her about Princess Issa, and states that she reminds him of her. I mostly bring up this scene because I have the sneaking suspicion that Sam is Issa, unbeknownst to everyone. I kind of hope I'm wrong, and that Issa ends up being some other young girl on Velt that we haven't met yet, because again, I'm of the mind that she is still alive. Just because I think it's a little too on the nose for Jimmy to explicitly say to Sam that her kindness makes him think of Issa, for part 2 to then reveal that she actually is Issa. But I mean, the setup is there if it happens, and if it's true, I want it on record that I predicted this. Due to the residents panicking, Cora quickly decides that she's going to leave Velt, as she doesn't see any hope in saving the community, and she does not want to be on the planet when Noble returns. While Cora is rushing to leave, she hears Sam pleading for help as a bunch of Imperium soldiers grab her, and it is abundantly clear that they plan to gang rape her, with the only Imperium soldier trying to save her being Eris. Cora quickly abandons her plan of escape and springs into action to save Sam, killing all the rest of the soldiers except for their commander, who is killed by Jimmy, an act that no one knew he could do given the peaceful nature of these machines since the king's death. After this act, Cora decides to go on a quest to find the legendary General Titus, an Imperium general who deserted the Motherworld, as well as the Blood Axes, resistance fighters that Noble is searching for and that Gunnar had previously sold Velt's surplus to. She and Gunnar leave Velt and go to the meeting point of Gunnar's contact who had helped him reach the Blood Axes. But they see said contact being taken away by the Imperium, and they instead try the local bar, hoping for information on Titus or the Blood Axes. Before Cora and Gunnar get the chance to ask around for information, a male alien comes up to the two of them, making it clear he wants to proposition Gunnar for a sexual encounter, presuming he can pay Gunnar to comply. When Cora politely declines the offer for payment, the alien gets more forceful, and as he continues to insist on having Gunnar's company, he gropes him before Cora quickly overpowers him and forcefully tells him to leave. The alien rushes out of the bar before returning with a few goons, leading to a shootout with Cora that ends in said alien and his goons dying. So, I'm incredibly conflicted on this scene. Remember how I mentioned that Sam is grabbed by some Imperium officers? For me, it's kind of impossible not to think back to Sam's attempted assault when watching Gunnar face sexual violence. While both of these situations end with the men who are wanting to commit sexual violence getting killed, which, hell yeah, we love to see the unequivocal stance that sexual harassment and sexual violence should not be tolerated, and that it is repugnant behavior. The difference in framing is really jarring. Like, okay, let me show the setup to these scenes. First, Sam's attempted assault.
A little water.
Stop it!
What?
This is shot almost like a horror film. The audience is supposed to feel terrified. We are supposed to be paralyzed in our fear for Sam's well-being. We are praying that she gets out of this unscathed, that Cora will step in before any of the men get the chance to do anything more than spew these threats. Now, here's the scene where the male alien tries to proposition Gunnar.
Is this your owner?
Move on. He's not for sale.
Everything's for sale in this place, so how much? You know, I have a room upstairs with relatively clean sheets.
I said move on.
Oh, come on, Mama! Let him come and play.
You need to leave.
It's comedic. We're supposed to laugh at the fact that this ugly-looking alien wants Gunnar and not Cora. Even the assault when this alien gropes Gunnar, it's still treated kind of comically, as Gunnar's reaction is more him being in physical pain and shocked than him being scared. Cora seems to be more resistant to starting a fight with this man, as she just quietly urges him to walk away and waits for him to threaten her before she gets more vehement in her refusal to comply. While there's definitely an attitude of disgust towards the perpetrators in both scenes, it feels like the scene where Gunnar is assaulted is given a lot less gravity. Which, since we're talking about sexual violence directed towards men, I feel the need to plug Pop Culture Detective's 2 brilliant videos on male victims of sexual assault. I'm gonna put both of those in the card. Please, please, please watch them if you have not already. As I said before, I love a lot of Zack Snyder's filmography, but I hate to say this. He's definitely not beating the homophobia allegations with this scene, because while I genuinely really appreciate the acknowledgement that men can be targets of sexual harassment and assault, while I genuinely appreciate a male director making a film that emphatically condemns sexual harassment and assault, this scene really just does not sit right with me. Returning to the narrative, once this alien and his friends are dealt with, we meet Kai. Again, apologies for more Star Wars comparisons, but Kai is a very Han Solo coded character. He's intrigued by Cora and Gunnar after hearing that they are searching for Titus and seeing Cora take on multiple men by herself. He's a pilot and refers to himself as an opportunist taking odd jobs for the money. He quickly offers to take them where they need to go, and even offers information of a potential warrior who might help them, Tarek. Tarek is a very honorable man, always paying his debts, even if those debts mean indentured servitude. He's very kind and gentle, as we see when he tames the Bennu. Kai also leads them to Nemesis, an assassin who cares very deeply about justice. She takes no joy in fighting, but like Tarek, realizes the honor in fighting for those who are vulnerable. After enlisting Tarak and Nemesis to join their cause, the group quickly tracks down Titus, and Cora convinces him to join with a promise of revenge against the Motherworld. After Titus has agreed to join, Cora and her team finally reach Deborah and Darian Bloodaxe. While they are initially resistant to help, Darian is convinced by Cora's insistence that the Bloodaxes owe Velt after receiving their surplus harvest the previous year. Darian and a few of the soldiers he leads agree to help Cora and leave with her crew. Kai then implies that after watching Cora gather the rest of her crew, that he wants to join her in this fight. He tells Cora that he fears there will be a bounty on him if he does not cut ties with his previous criminal life, and asks the rest of the crew to help him unload this last shipment so he can officially leave it behind. But, as it turns out, this final shipment is to the Motherworld, and he is planning to deliver Cora and all of her newfound allies to the Imperium. Now, I gasped at this reveal because I was so busy being amused by how incredibly Han Solo-esque his character was that I was just blindsided by him not actually being a good guy. Like, I have to give Snyder huge props for pulling off this twist because it really does turn everything that we thought we knew about Kai on its head. And upon reaching this plot twist, I realized the point of his character is to be a foil to Gunnar. That Gunnar is everything that Kai pretended to be. Because while Kai gives Cora information on potential allies, he does so in hopes of collecting a larger bounty, when Gunnar is always honest, even if it's to his detriment. While Kai pretends to be inspired by Cora's bravery, Gunnar genuinely is. And there are multiple instances where he puts himself in harm's way as he continues on this journey with her. While Kai gives a facade of kindness and honor, by the end of the film, with Gunnar finally putting real skin in the game, he proves to have these qualities. And while this realization allows me to appreciate Gunnar in a way, he is still without a doubt my least favorite character in this movie. I still do not like him very much. As this small group of rebels is now forced into exchanging fire with Noble and a handful of his troops, most of Darian's soldiers are targeted and killed by one of the Motherworld ships. Darian manages to kill the pilot of the ship, unfortunately at the expense of his own life. Or so it seems. I'm really, really, really hoping for a reveal that he's alive in the sequel, because Ray Fisher is like 80% of the reason why I was excited for this movie. And if his role in this universe is really this small, I'm going to be very pissed. Cora then has a face-off with Noble, and this scene is so incredibly satisfying. Watching Cora destroy Noble's staff and using the broken pieces to stab and kill him, delicious. I love it so much. They have destroyed the ships that had come to collect them, and This proves that they do indeed have a shot at winning, as it is a big blow to the Mother World, even though this victory has clearly cost them as well. The film then ends with Cora and the rest of the group returning to Velt, and Noble being revived and being told that his mission to capture Cora is still of the utmost priority. So, yeah, as I said at the beginning of the review, it feels like we're stopping right before the action revs up. So again, kind of an awkward place to leave things, but I have incredibly high hopes for part 2. Now, do I think this is Zack Snyder's best film? Definitely not. I don't think he can top Batman v Superman, which, by the way, is my favorite film of all time. Do I think this is his worst film? Also, no. It's very hard to come up with your own story that is not an adaptation of some other work, which, in a sense, I guess this kind of is, as this is a rejected Star Wars script, but it is a new IP, a new universe that is 100% created by Zack, and that's just a crazy huge endeavor. I mean, I can't think of a completely new IP that is at this scale of world building. Like, I mean, the big stuff is Marvel, DC, Star Wars, and Star Trek, and all of those franchises have 40 plus years worth of world building. So it's pretty impressive, even if it doesn't feel completely original. Which, kind of continuing that thought, I've seen so many people complain about this film being predictable or cliche, and it's just driving me crazy because, like, guys, predictability is not a sin. In fact, I would argue that that's very good storytelling when it's executed well. And, like, what isn't predictable or cliche nowadays? Like, originality is dead. We need to face that. Anyway, I think that's about it for my thoughts. Thank you so much for listening to this. I hope I gave you some things to think about. Or if you didn't like this film, I hope you got a new perspective and maybe you can appreciate some qualities of it. If you have any thoughts on the film, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear what you thought. I'd love to dig deeper into this universe and the lore. So, like, anything you want to share, I would love to hear it. Please don't stop talking about Palestine. Please don't stop talking about Sudan. Continue boycotting. COVID rates are going up again, so please, please, please continue masking and or start masking again if you have stopped. There was a vaccine for new variants released in like early October. So if you can get it and you haven't already, please do so. Hopefully I'll catch you again in the future. I'm sure I'll talk about Rebel Moon Part 2. And I'll probably talk about some other work from Zack Snyder because, as I've said a few times, I really like a lot of his films. I'm hoping to do more quick essays like this. And I'm working on some longer form essays about TV shows. So there's tons of stuff in the works, and hopefully some of that is of interest. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and goodbye.